Mr. Naughty Becomes Mr. Nice by Laura Anne Ewald. His real name was Mr. Lottie, but we called him Mr. Naughty because he was the meanest teacher in the whole school. If you were unlucky enough to get stuck in his class, you knew it would be a bad year. Even the grown-ups didn't like him. I'd overheard Mrs. Jackson tell Miss Truly that he was a cranky jerk. I missed what Miss Truly said about him, but since she was the nicest grown-up at school, I couldn't imagine she liked him. Mr. Lottie did one good thing. Every Friday, he made us spend the last hour reading. I always brought a good book, but one Friday, I made the mistake of bringing Lad, a dog. It was a really old book, but I love animal stories. I knew I was taking a chance, though, and in the last chapter, it happened. Rex goes crazy and attacks Lad. There's this bloody fight scene, and you just know Lad is going to die. I could hardly see the pages for crying. Then the bell rang, and everyone else jumped up. I couldn't move the book from in front of my face, or else they'd all see me crying over a stupid book. Thankfully, they left quickly, but when I looked up, there was Mr. Lottie watching me. I cried harder then, but he did the most amazing thing. He came to me, took my book, sat down, and began to read. I'd never heard anything like it. His voice wasn't anything like it usually sounded. It was incredible how he read the vicious battle scene and how Lad was rescued and healed. Then he read the afterword, about how the real Lad had been buried with a tombstone that said, "Lad, thoroughbred in body and soul." I heard a hitch in Mr. Lottie's voice, and when I looked up, his eyes were really bright. He didn't say anything, just smiled, handed me my book, and got up to return to his desk. He stopped halfway, though, because Miss Truly was standing in the doorway. She must have been there long enough to hear the end of the story, because she was crying too. She smiled at me as I went out, but when I glanced back, I saw Miss Truly go into Mr. Lottie's classroom and close the door behind her.